FAIR set up offices in early 1979 in a basement of a building on New Hampshire Avenue, and we started to do what none of us knew how to do: establish a new national immigration reform organization and spur the growth of a social movement. As we drew up statements of purpose and began to write position papers, I remember that someone said, "You know, this job is going to be really hard. This could take 5, even 10 years." A second memory from the early days was that we had considerable difficulty in the District of Columbia getting our calls returned. "I'm calling from FAIR." "You're who?" The long-term solution was to build a solid reputation year by year and day by day. There's some misinformation about FAIR out there even today. And the mainstream media are misinformed about a lot of things, and they'll always be. Sometimes they're willfully so, but we at FAIR became players in the hard way. Not just by getting Bill Bray and Lamb and the others, though that's crucial. We produced informed, credible material, facts and analysis and policy recommendations, and we have been doing this for a very long time. Reputation, it is called, and it is essential, and it has to be earned, and you can't buy it. Now when they say, "Yeah, I know who you are, I'll return your call," this is hard-earned. I emphasize that because when we started out, we didn't have that. Love them. In those early days, from our cramped offices in the basement, there was some symbolism being down there. I'm not sure what it was. We quickly put a staff together, just barely in time to engage in a series of fierce battles over both illegal and legal immigration, starting with the Hesburgh Report of 1980 and the legislative wars over IRCA, culminating in 1986 in a disappointment that taught us a lot. Then we saddled up again for the legislative battle over a 1990 change in immigration policy, and we had to accept another expansion and softening of immigration policy, which would have been worse if FAIR had not been there. When Winston Churchill was Prime Minister of Britain during the wartime blitzkrieg over London and most British cities, a young reporter asked him, "Mr. Prime Minister, why are we fighting?" Response, "If we stop, you will find out." I don't know if Dan Stein ever used that bit of history, but he should use it. We didn't lose that long battle that ran through the Bush 8 years. Indeed, I am willing to use strong words. We won in that we beat the proposition on the table. FAIR and all the other organizations who see reform as we see it, and we won by using not only our own well-crafted arguments about the folly of amnesties, of which there have already been 8, and of guest worker programs, and of enlarging the number of visas until everyone in the world could move his family to the U.S. We won, more importantly, because we found ways to mobilize and aim and fire the only really big weapon we ever had: the American people. Beyond staving off an open borders proposal pushed by a formidable alliance, just think about who's trying to beat us up. Large and small employers of cheap labor, including paupers like Bill Gates, linked up with ethnic lobbies funded by foundation millions, plus the labor movement, the national headquarters of the religious denominations, the universities, the mass media, the government of Mexico. Beyond beating back their calamitous demands, we ought to allow ourselves to remember that the immigration reform movement that we've been involved in gave voice to millions of Americans who knew from life in their neighborhoods and workplaces that mass immigration was bringing high costs, huge costs, in depressed wages, crowded schools and hospital emergency rooms, a tragic demographic reversal of our population trends in which a prospect of a U.S. population stabilization was reversed by the mass immigration of foreigners, produced by what we have been living with for the last 3 decades, a growth surge that now gives the U.S. the fastest growing population in the developed world. and will push America's population to 1 billion heavy footprint people by century's end. The performance of FAIR's legal team. We talked about a legal team way back, and then we tried to look into the cost of a legal team, and there was a gleam in Dan's eye that someday he could do this, but it was hard coming. Now we have a legal team, and before it was formed, if the mayor and city council of Hazleton wanted to draft an ordinance curbing illegal immigrant access to city services, they did not know how to write a law that could stand up to the legal challenge from well-funded illegal immigrant protectors. FAIR's lawyers have stepped into that breach. It's a fabulous thing to have done, and it was not easy.